amazing, amazing and energetic presenter. Today, we're fortunate to have Tracy O'Rourke with us. Tracy O'Rourke is the co-author of The Problem Solvers Toolkit, co-founder of Just in Time Cafe, co-host of the Just in Time Cafe podcast. She's a master black belt, a Lean Six Sigma green belt instructor, has gone to school at UC San Diego, and is the creator of a parody music video mix and a zealot for process improvement. For 25 plus years, Tracy has consulted in the process improvement industry. She's advised companies on many aspects of process improvement, culture change, leadership development, team facilitation, and strategic alignment. Just for fun, Tracy created 2 parody music videos. The 80s rap song Baby Got Back by Sir Mix-a-Lot was turned into Baby Got Tools by Miss Fix-a-Lot. And Vanilla Ice's Ice Ice Baby was turned into 5S Baby. So get out and check out her musical videos on YouTube, and we'll pop the links in the chat for you there. And you can also find Tracy O'Rourke on her website, www.tracyaorourke.com. We'll also put that link in the chat for you. And she's also on LinkedIn. And so without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic to Tracy.
Thank you so much, Jeannie, for that introduction. Can you hear me okay?
Loud.
All right, great. Hey, everybody, happy Halloween. This is my absolute favorite day and favorite holiday of all time. And I would be in a costume right now, but I am not at home with my 40 plus wigs in the garage and all of my holiday garb. But I do have a Halloween cup. So happy Halloween, everyone. And thank you for joining me today. I have been multiple times a part of the Lean Washington conference from Results Washington, and I absolutely love being a part of this session. And I really love the virtual formats, as do, how many do we have? 570 of you. So thank you for coming. Okay, I'm super excited about today's session, mostly because this is something that I have used over the past 15 plus years to enhance my effectiveness and the people that I'm helping, their effectiveness with process improvement. So one thing I like to sort of start with is talking about painful processes. So I think the challenge that a lot of us have is we have a painful process, but people don't seem to want to embrace change to improve it. And it seems like people are really comfortable in the status quo, even though the solution or the improvement would make it so much easier, faster, better. So do you wonder why people won't get behind change, even though it seems to make so much sense? They resist. So there's a lot of different things we can do to help people embrace change. And those can be positive and negative. I like to focus on the positive ways as opposed to beating people into submission. And so that's what we're going to discuss today is some very important, and I believe change management tools that are very effective. And they are concepts, again, that I've used for many, many years. And the best thing, you can start using them today. So in this one short hour, I'm going to talk as fast as I can, and we're going to cover a couple of concepts. So first, we're going to discover some helpful behavioral change psychology. I'm going to talk a little bit about Gemba Walks. There's lots of different ways to go to Gemba, and we're not going to have time to cover all of them today. So I'm going to focus on the one that I feel like is very valuable for process improvement. Well, they're all valuable, but for actually improving the process. And I'm going to show you how you can practice applying. Again, we only have a short hour, but I'm going to give you some exercises and you can try them even today if you want over lunchtime. How's that? So let's talk for a few minutes a little bit about this history of this concept that I'm about to introduce. So there is a book, it's called The Happiness Hypothesis. I don't know if any of you have read it. It's by Jonathan Haidt. He was a Yale graduate in 1985. He's a social psychologist professor of ethical leadership at the New York University Stern School of Business. And this book is about how we can train our brains to be more optimistic and build better relationships and achieve a sense of balance. And it's a great book, pick it up. But he also explores how to overcome obstacles to well-being that we place in our own way. So I think that one of the really interesting things about this book is he introduces this metaphor of the elephant and the rider. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what this analogy is. So this is an analogy to explain our brains. And it's a great way to think about how our brains work. So the rider is the rational side of the brain, and the elephant is the emotional side of the brain. So the rider is analytical and rational, and the elephant is emotional and passionate. And so I think some people get confused a little here because we don't have a rider brain or an elephant brain. Everyone has a rider and elephant brain to some degree. And you probably know of some people that are very analytical and they tend to use their rider brain a lot. So visually, you can see that the elephant is physically much bigger and stronger than the rider. And the rider is on the elephant's back, holding the reins. And by pulling on one way or the other, the rider can have the elephant turn or stop or go in a different direction if necessary. But only when the elephant wants to or doesn't have desires of its own. So when the elephant really wants to do something or doesn't want to do something, you know, then the rider has control. But anytime the 6-ton elephant and the rider disagree about which direction to go, who do you think is going to win? The rider or the elephant? So if any of you guessed, the rider's going to lose. He's completely overmatched by the elephant. And so that's conceptually what this concept is about. And I want to just talk a little bit about making this a bit more familiar. We are all too familiar, actually, with this situation where the elephant overpowers the rider. So if you've ever experienced procrastination, or maybe you tried to quit smoking and failed, or you want to go to the gym, but you don't feel like it. You know you should go to the gym and you should, work out, but you don't feel like it. Or you abandon your piano lessons so you can watch your Netflix show. So these are all the elephant overtaking the rider. And, I think a really important one that we deal with even daily is diet, right? So let's face it, most of us know what we need to do. It's not about knowledge, it's about motivation. So you should be eating your greens, but you really want the cookie. How many have been there? Okay, so that is the rider and the elephant wrestling with what to do. And this is something we deal with all the time. And really, the size difference does make it difficult for the rider. And it's very true. The rider is sometimes struggling with this unruly animal, and that can be exhausting. So even if the rider wins for a short period of time, eventually it's exhausting because the elephant isn't there. It's just not motivated to do it. So this is really about the motivation and finding the motivation. So when there's conflict between our emotional and rational brain, it's very similar to the rider needing a break after working to keep the elephant in check for a long time. So we get worn out. So this is the analogy that I want to really talk about. And this analogy was taken to another level in another book and more mainstream. And this book is called Switch. And this is actually the book that I have been really using for a very long time. I wrote a book, but I'm going to talk about somebody else's book today because I just think it's so very valuable. So this is one of my favorite change management books of all time. It was written by Chip and Dan Heath. They're psychology professors at Stanford's Graduate School of Business. And they teach courses on business strategy and organizations. And you've probably heard of them before. They've written numerous books like Made to Stick, Decisive, The Power of Moments, to name a few. But this book, like I said, has fundamentally enhanced my approach to helping organizations strengthen their operational excellence programs and making change easier. So I'm going to reference some concepts in this book, but if you really want the whole enchilada, you need to buy the book and read it. I am not making any money off of it. This is just something I've used, and I think it has made a huge difference. And my hope is that you'll get even more out of this than I did. So I want to share a quick story back to this analogy of the concept of the rider and the elephant that hit me pretty hard when I was reading it. So I live here in San Diego, and I get a lot of visitors in San Diego because, well, I mean, it is paradise. Sorry, I know people are going to hate me by saying that. It's wintertime. I can never talk about the weather here in San Diego, and people just tell me to be quiet. So anyway, many years ago, I went to SeaWorld to meet a friend who was visiting San Diego, and she was bringing her kids. And so we met up at SeaWorld because I had young children at the same time, and we went to the Shamu show. And so I've seen this show many times, as you know, because I had kids and I had a lot of visitors. And let's just show this a little bit. So as they got started with the show and they're playing the music, I kind of recognized, I've seen the show before and I kind of recognized the music. And there's this one part in the show where there's this crescendo at the very beginning of the show. There's a crescendo in the music, and the Shamu is supposed to jump all the way out of the water. The whole whale is exposed out of the water. And guess what? It didn't happen. So I heard the music and no whale. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Something's not right. And then they stopped the music. And people have started talking like, what's happening? Not impressed, right? So then someone came out in a diving uniform and said, we're sorry, but something just happened that hasn't happened in 8 years. And I was like, what's going on? This isn't part of the show. And he went and explained the process of engaging a whale to perform. He said it was a series of agreements, and most of the time, one of the whales would agree to it, and a lot of it was treats-based, like food-based, and they would agree to do the show. Well, this time, none of the 8 whales agreed. They all said, heck no. And guess what? He said, well, we really don't have a choice. If an 8,000-pound whale doesn't want to perform, we're sorry. So come back at 5 o'clock and maybe we'll be luckier. So of course it was very packed, but it kind of stuck with me because I was like, oh my gosh, we can't motivate the elephant. They can't motivate the elephant, the emotional part of our brain. I was starting to think about this book. And so now I want you to think about other people you work with, because this theory does work both ways. If we want to change how other people behave, we can't forget that they have their own elephants and their riders to contend with. If you want to help people change their habits or initiate a change within your workplace, keep in mind that you've got to address both. You can't just say you got to do this change because it's going to save money or it's going to save hours even. Sometimes they need more of an emotional connection to the change. And the sad part is we are very good at talking to the rider. We are very good at speaking about the financial impact or saving hours or being more productive or being more efficient. And that's all the rational side. But we aren't as good about creating emotional connections to change. And so this is a great example of the psychology of the brain. You can try to rationalize yourself all the way about why something is good or right or why you should do it. But sometimes the emotional side is holding all the weight, pardon the pun. So let's discuss some of the characteristics of the rider and the elephant just a little bit more. So the rational mind and the emotional mind, they do compete for control. And the rational mind does want a beach body, but the emotional mind wants the Oreo cookie. The rational mind wants something at work, a change to happen at work. But guess what? The emotional mind loves the comfort of the existing routine, right? And you've heard that before, right? And I know I've even done that. Sometimes I've just done something for so long, I don't have to think about it and it's comfortable. And now I got to think about it because we changed it. Even if it's better, sometimes there's something about that comfort that draws us back in. And that's why we typically have to follow up on process improvement. It's not because people don't like you, it's not because they even didn't like the change. It's because we're dealing with habit, and habit is strong. And there's, this not thinking, this comfort of that existing routine that draws people back into doing something the way they used to. So, as I said before, we're all familiar with these situations where the elephant overpowers the rider. So, we've got weaknesses over here that, the rider could be analytical, they could spin their wheels. Sometimes they don't get things done because they're analyzing. They can brainstorm really great ideas, but not a lot of decisions sometimes happen. But the writer's strength is rational, thoughtful, fact, and database. So that's the writer side of our brains. The elephant's weakness in terms of brain is lazy, skittish. They look for instant gratification. But the strength of elephants is love, compassion, loyalty, and that spine stiffening feel when you want to stand up for yourself. So these are all the strengths of the elephant. So at work, you do hear people speak with the WIFM, what's in it for me, to mobilize change. But we tend to only speak to the rider, like I said, and we ignore the elephant. And we tend to talk, like I said, about those financial savings. But we do need to address both. We need to address the rider and the elephant when we're talking about change. And in actuality, there's actually another piece. According to the book Switch, here's the secret recipe for successful change. Ready? Pay attention here. It's 3 things. In the book Switch, the Heath brothers say that if you want more successful change, you have to do all 3 of the following things. You have to direct the rider, you have to motivate the elephant, and you have to shape the path. So all of these things you have to do. It's all 3, not just one. The most successful changes actually address all 3 of these things. And I had said earlier, so I actually do teach a course on all of these. But for today, since we only have 1 hour, we're going to focus on the one that most of us need to do better. Most people actually do pretty good with directing the rider, talking to the financial and the analytical side of people. And we actually often do a good job of what we call shaping the path, which is laying it out so they're not confused about what they're supposed to be doing or how they do it. And so today, for the remaining amount of time we have together, we're going to focus on motivating the elephant. So there's 3 things with motivating the elephant that you want to think about. You could do any one of these things to motivate the elephant. First, find the feeling, and shrink the change and grow your people. So these are the 3. Find the feeling is really a gut level emotional connection where people feel something. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Another one is shrinking the change. Now, this is something that you've probably done maybe where you actually make the change feel smaller than it is. Or, like sometimes people feel like, so I do this all the time with my teaching in Greenbelt. I'm teaching people problem solving and I'm teaching them root cause analysis. But guess what? They've done this before. I mean, they've gone through life solving problems already. We're just sort of fine tuning the tools that you're going to use to make to solve problems better. And so, it shouldn't feel monumental to learn this method. It's something it's inherent in all of us. And so I do that all the time. I didn't even realize it was called shrink the change, but I was talking about it like that all the time because sometimes people starting at the very beginning of a journey feels exhausting, but if people feel like they are already along the way, it somehow feels better. And finally, grow your people, making that change feel smaller and help people grow bigger. That's sort of an abstract, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But why don't we go ahead and start with finding the feeling. Okay, let's see here. All right, so here's the thing. There's a big misnomer about how change happens. And this is with the concept of find the feeling. So many people have this misperception of how change occurs. They think change occurs like this. You think, you analyze, and you change. And think and analyze, again, speak to the writer. That's why we're always looking for data and numbers to support our change. But how change really occurs is we see, we feel, we change. So seeing and feeling speaks to the elephant. And you need the elephant on your side when it comes to making change. And I'm going to share a few examples of this. And again, this is people feel something and it prompts them to want to make a change because they feel an emotional connection. And again, this concept, I will say, is finding the feeling. Like anything, you can use it and enhance people and optimize people and their experiences with process improvement, or you could use it not in a great way, manipulatively, and that's not going to have a good outcome. So it's not the method that is bad. It's, how you use it is really what you want to think about. So I'm going to share some quick examples of the rider and the elephant. So this is actually from the book Switch. I almost forgot. Okay, so two health researchers. They were research professors at West University. Here's an example of speaking to the rider and then speaking to the elephant for the same thing. So these two researchers, they wanted to do sort of a study on getting people to eat healthier. So they thought, where should we begin? Breakfast, lunch, dinner? And so they decided to target milk, since it's the single largest source of saturated fat in the Americans' diet. So in their research, they discovered that if Americans switched from whole milk to 1% milk, they would be at the recommended USDA levels of saturated fat. And upon thinking about how to change behavior here, their hypothesis was that they didn't need to change drinking behavior. They needed to change purchasing behavior. They had this hypothesis that if there was 1% milk in the refrigerator, that milk drinkers would still drink the milk if it was in their fridge. So they targeted behavioral change in the study, buying skim milk instead of 1% milk, instead of whole milk, sorry. So they selected a target campaign. They monitored milk sales at all 8 stores. And after they got some significant results. But this is really directing the writer here. So you could say, look, here's the math behind it or the analytics behind it. Okay, so whole milk is, 70 calories are from fat, it's 25% saturated fat, but look at non-fat milk, it's 0 and 0% saturated fat, right? Okay, so you should do this. Now, do you have any emotional ties to that? Do you feel anything when somebody gives you this information? It's great information analytically. And yeah, maybe some people would change, but the amount of change may not be as great. So they had a very interesting campaign and they made an interesting discovery. They discovered that this milk is the single largest source of saturated fat. And the amount of saturated fat in 1 glass of whole milk is the same amount of fat as in 5 slices of bacon. So what? 5 slices of bacon? That's how much fat is in milk? Are you kidding me? And you know what? Even if you weren't on a diet, what do you want to eat? You want to eat the whole milk or you want to eat the bacon? Right? So the bacon, so a lot of people like bacon. I think there's shirts about bacon on everything. But whole milk has the same amount of fat. So why don't you save your fat for eating bacon? But I think it was really telling. So this was actually the marketing campaign that they said, and they actually were telling people to buy skim milk. They had some pretty significant results. They went from 18% market share to 41%. And 6 months later, it held at 35%. So that's just an example that came from the book that I thought was really interesting. But ultimately, the campaign was to the writer and to the elephant of both sides of people's brains. So that was a very long story. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoy your bacon when you eat it. But I'm going to give you some really simple examples as well of focusing on the motivating an elephant and how easy it really can be if you put some thinking behind it. So this was actually something that I did with my son when he was in Cub Scouts. We volunteered at a food bank here in San Diego, and we brought a bunch of Cub Scouts in, and we were sorting food actually. We were sorting carrots from, bad carrots to good carrots. We were cleaning them, we were scrubbing them. We were, some adults were using a chopper to chop them. And after we were all done, all the Cub Scouts are covered in, carrot, I don't know, pieces. Look like we just wrestled in a carrot gym. But so after we were done, they said, okay, you were able to accomplish 30 pounds of carrots that you went through. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, good. And then they said, that's going to help us feed 80 children. Right? Their wide eyes told the story. Like they felt this huge sense of pride and community and knowing that they had helped other kids get meals, right? So they could have just focused on the 80 pounds of carrots or 30 pounds of carrots, but the way they had told the story of their impact really, I think, spoke to them. So that's an example of motivating the elephant that I've seen. And I want to talk about a few more that you might recognize in the neighborhood. So here's another one. You've seen this before. School speed limit, 25. Do you see people, just banging down the road, wondering if they ever saw the sign? Sometimes this doesn't speak to them. Yeah, okay, that's maybe the law or the rule, but if they are busy or if you feel like they gotta get somewhere really quickly, they might not listen, they might not pay attention. And sometimes people do slow down. But now this one's a little better. We've got a visual of a parent and a child in a school zone. So it's, a reminder speaking to, okay, look, we got people here, kids here. And then one day I was driving by and I saw this sign, drive like your kids live here, right? So same thing, but a little more stronger to get people to feel something around making a change to slow down, please. And so again, this may have a bigger, broader impact than the first one. So these are, again, just examples of you can speak to the rider, but sometimes speaking to the elephant is much stronger and it sends a stronger message for change. So this one I just saw last week and I changed my presentation to include it. I went to the Lean Construction Conference here in San Diego. It's based on, it's LCI, Lean Construction Institute. And they are obviously in the construction business. And so as you can imagine, one of the biggest challenges the construction business has is getting people to wear their PPE, right? So safety gear, we don't want you to get hurt. People not wearing their goggles, people not wearing their helmets, people not wearing steel-toed shoes. And this has been a struggle that the construction industry has had for a long time. And there's been lots of attempted efforts at trying to improve people wearing safety goggles. And so, you can see here that they have stop, wear your personal protective equipment. So they might have a stop sign. They might even say visually beyond this line, you need to be wearing it. So it gives them a visual reminder. I've even seen mannequins at that line to remind people to put your PPE on. So I heard a presentation from the vice president of one of the companies, and so this is the example of maybe a PPE, and this is the sign they have now. Nothing you do on this site today will be as important as going home to your family and loved ones. And, it really speaks to, respect for people, first of all, right? We don't want anybody getting hurt on this job site. We want you to be able to go home and enjoy your family. And she was telling the story, vice president was telling the story about how a few years ago, she went onto a job site and there was somebody that was spraying paint and he wasn't wearing his goggles. And she said, well, where's your goggles? And he had them in his pocket. He hadn't even, he didn't have them on. And she's like, he said, well, I don't wear them because I get paint on my goggles and then I can't see. Okay, so if you're not wearing them, where's the paint going? It's going in his eyes. And she's like, what the most important part about working here, she said to him, is you going home to your family. And don't you want to be able to see your kids and your wife and your home? And if you're getting pain in your eyes, you're not going to be able to. And so, it wasn't the answer. The answer wasn't to wear them. The answer was, let's find a way for you to be protected and so that you could see if the paint gets on them. And so, but they have had a really big, important journey on safety. And this is really speaking to people, doing it because you're motivated to go home every day safe. So I think these are very powerful examples of how to how to motivate the elephant, the emotional connection that we have. They're there. And especially process improvement. There's a lot of things we're doing in process improvement to enhance people's lives, really. I mean, this is actually one of the reasons why I do what I do, because I'm making people's lives better and I'm making people's personal lives better and work lives better, because I'm eliminating pain, right? There's less pain associated with processes. Avoidable pain is what I call it. So I want to talk a little bit about a tool that you do have in your arsenal, by the way, to motivate the elephant. And it talks about it in the title. It's process Gemba Walks. So if this is not going to be a session on how to do a Gemba walk or a process Gemba walk, I actually have a class with the TKMG Academy that is on process walks. If you want to look that up, you're welcome to. But it's all about how to do a process walk. But a process Gemba walk. So Gemba is a Japanese word. It means go to the real place. I translate all Japanese words into English, so I call it a process walk. And ultimately, it's basically walking a process. There's lots of different kinds of walks, and there's lots of ways to go to Gemba. This particular walk is when a process improvement team goes to walk the process to try to streamline it or make it better. So usually the people doing this walk are the people that work in the process, and everyone's walking it together to try to understand the current state of the process. So you can also do virtual Gemba walks. So a lot of people go, I can't do a Gemba walk. I'm not even on site anymore. People do virtual Gemba walks all the time. You don't have to go into physical spaces to understand the process. You can do it on Zoom. And you can view what people's screens are. You can have a coworker talk through what they do to the thing that's going through the process. So these are ultimately things you could do. So here's the big question. How the heck is this tool motivating the elephant, Tracy? So like I said, I think the biggest aha I see is I see why people do this. This is student voted. This is their favorite tool. And the reason why is because they walk the process and they see coworkers want to make change. And what do you think the emotional thing is that they're seeing? It's pain. They're seeing process pain as a part of this process. And you may not like your coworker, but you know what? When you see that you're actually causing pain for other people in the process downstream, there's a lot of motivation to want to reduce that, because ultimately they don't want to be the cause of pain. And so that's really where this process walk can be very powerful. And so there's a lot of reasons why process walks are valuable. I'm just going to go through some of these very quickly. But process walks, people say, well, why do you want to walk a process? Lots of reasons. But first one is there's many different versions of a process. What you think it is, what it truly is, what it should be, and what it could be. And so these are the different versions. And we really want to move people from what you think it is, the top left on this slide, to the top right of the slide, what it truly is. Because often people can't improve a process if they don't have a shared understanding of current state. So you're getting people to have a shared understanding of current state and a shared understanding of the current pain. And so that could be very powerful. And then people could say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And, sometimes, and I think the biggest mistake I see is I see sometimes black belts walking the process by themselves and not with everybody, and they're interviewing everybody, but they didn't let people come with them. That's the biggest mistake you could make, because it's the person downstream that realizes they need that report and that the upstream person has, and you may not identify that. They may also identify that there's repetition happening, but you may not know that right away. So that's what a process walk does. It helps people get a true picture of what's really happening in the process. And, how many of you work in service and or transactional processes, also known as non-manufacturing processes? That's 80% of what I do. And guess what? We actually have an added challenge in applying process improvement, and that is that our processes are invisible, right? Look at this picture. It's an old picture. I know. Look at those computers. But do you see a process in this picture? No, you can't see a process. You can't walk into a room and go, oh my gosh, that employee onboarding process is horrible. You can't. It's invisible. It's all in our computers. And so how do you know when a process is not working? Well, usually it's because people aren't happy about the process, or there's people complaining about the process, or somebody sitting here blows a gasket, right? They're like, what the heck? And what do? We look at them and go, what's wrong with them? They can't do their job. We blame them because guess what? We can't see the process, but we can see people. So we're going to blame the people. So this is the stuff that happens. This is why we want to walk processes, because it reminds us that it's not the person often. And sometimes it's the person. That's a different whole discussion altogether. But often we can't see the process. And if we can't see the process, then that means over time, the process is going to be designed like this. How many of you feel like you work in a process that is designed like this, right? Or you're a customer of a process that's designed like this. And you know how hard it would be to work in this process? You have to, you may be a customer of this process, a process designed like this, and you just have to experience it a couple of times. The people that have to work in it, man, they're the biggest victims of this process because they got to work in it every freaking day. So be nice to them. There's lots of reasons why a process could look like this. But again, if it's invisible, that's why sometimes these maps we put together are crazy, because we're like, really? This is the process? How did this happen? So anyway, process walks help see the process, make it more visible, because often after you walk it, you map it together as well. But again, I think going back to the whole purpose, process walks motivate the elephant because you do find a feeling, especially when you walk it together. You're building a shared understanding of the process, and you might discover, oh my gosh, I make it difficult for other people downstream. And they start to think about how they might do the process differently to streamline it. Or there's so many steps in this part of the process. I actually feel sorry for you now. I used to hate you, and now I feel sorry for you. I want to give you a hug because I can't believe you have to do that process. I'm sorry. I'll be nice to you from now on. Or there's so many time-consuming forms, or why is that? So people have these ahas, and they're sharing this together. And that's why it can be very helpful to do the process walk. So if you want to learn more about process walks in general, again, there's lots of stuff out there. There's books on process walks. Like I said, I have a class with TKMG Academy on process walks. I think I have a free webinar in my archives that I could share with you. But ultimately, do the process walks. And again, it should be a positive experience. It should not feel like, I got you. I caught you lying. It shouldn't be. People should feel safe in a process walk. It should be a positive thing that people want to repeat. Okay, so process walks do help you find the feeling. I find that people are more likely to want to make changes after they've done a process walk with the people they work with. Okay, we're going to move on because we don't have a whole lot of time. I'm going to talk just briefly about shrink the change. I already gave you guys an example of shrink the change. This is anytime you're setting small goals for people. One of the biggest I sometimes will do classes for organizations, and then I'll go back and revisit. And I went to this client I was working with at one point. I did some greenbelt training for them. And about, I don't know, 4 years later, we were checking in and they were doing more training. And I was asking them, well, how long are these greenbelt projects now? And they said 18 months. 18 months? That's a long. So to me, I'm like, that learning cycle, it's too long. Sure. Sometimes projects might be that long, but really, they should be smaller. They should be shorter. Nobody wants to sign up for almost a 2 year long project. They're going to feel exhausted by the end of that. So sometimes creating smaller goals or smaller projects can help people. You're shrinking the change for them. So there's just a couple examples in here. This is just an example of a car wash card. It was an experiment, right? So there were two car washes, and you've seen these cards where you buy something and then they stamp your card, and when you get all of them filled, you get something for free. You get some like a free coffee or a free car wash in this case. So they did an example, and they had a card with 8 stamps to fill, and when you bought a car wash, they would give you the card blank. And then they did the experiment where they had a card with 10 stamps to fill, but when you used it and you got it the first time, they put 2 stamps on it. And so they shrunk the change, if you will, because they made it feel like you're already on your way to filling out this card. And 6 months later, 19% of the 8 stamps earned a free wash, but 34% of the Head Start group earned a free car wash. So that's just an example. Okay. I'm going to move into grow your people. Again, this is just some examples. So this one is also really important, especially if you are in government. Grow your people is making change feel smaller, but really you're making people grow bigger, and you're making change a matter of identity. So this is also talks about it in the book. But also James March, he's a professor at Stanford University. He says that people rely on 2 basic decision-making models. The consequences model, which is cost versus benefit, right? Rational and analytical changing, and what's the cost versus the benefit. And then there's the identity model. And the identity model is that you've got an adopted set of beliefs that define who you are. We all have identities. We have personal identities, we have professional identities, and we choose. Sometimes we don't. Like I was born, I'm half Asian and half Irish. I was born into that identity. I'm a female. I'm born into that identity. But we also choose our identities, religion, politics, our whatever we decide to do for work. We choose identities too. And once it becomes their identity, this is why we don't talk about religion and politics at work, because it's a part of people's identity and they have a very strong connection. And when you threaten somebody's identity, it's not going to go well. So change happens when they identify that they do something because it's a part of their identity. So the question people ask is, what would someone like me do in this situation? And so I'm helping the Navy right now. I help them a couple of days a week. And, change can be hard there. There's so much bureaucracy, and like many government organizations, but ultimately we want to be good stewards of people's money. We want to be good stewards of where we spend our time. And that means continuous improvement should really be a part of something we do all the time. And so we're connecting to the identity of people working in government or working for the Navy or whatever it is. So that's really what this identity model is. We're making changes as a matter of identity. And, some people have strong identities at work too. And, they naturally make process improvement a part of working at this company. So as an example, Menlo Innovations is a company. They were written about in Jeffrey Liker's book, The Toyota Way. They are, you work there, you do process improvement. And this is a picture of me at the Navy with the XO and the CO. And they're doing process improvement because this is something we should be doing to better serve the Navy. And so that is an example of connecting to our identity. It's just something that we should be doing. And I think I really liked that explanation of, connecting it to people's identity. And there's a lot of really great examples of this in the book if you end up getting the book. Okay, So just a couple of examples, and these you can apply some of these. I'm not going to go through all these because we're running out of time. But these are just things you want to think about if you really want to try it on your own. So here's an application one. A university head needs departments to reduce budgets by 5%. Most of them understand and agree with the needs to cut back, but there's a danger of people dragging their heels. So what would you do to find the feeling, shrink the change, or grow your people? As an example. So I'm going to let you do that on your own. And another example could be developers are responsible for writing new programs. They fell in love with their code. And when their program was tested by customers, they say, well, who selected the idiots to test? What? So this is, them not necessarily being sympathetic to the user and really kind of falling in love with what they built. So how would you apply how would you motivate the elephant in this situation? How would you find the feeling or shrink the change or grow your people as an example? And if you want to put that in the chat window, you can. It's up to you. And then there's also this example of safety. So I kind of, I found this example with safety, but this is a new safety policy rollout. 950 people are in a dangerous work environment, but the current safety policies are ambiguous and not followed. And the goal is to increase safety protection and get 100% compliance. So, this is, I already showed you the example of motivating the elephant with safety. And also, I will say that I went on a tour of the Gaylord Pacific Convention Center. It's being built down here in San Diego. It's a $1 billion build, and they've been doing it for 3 years. They attribute 5S and safety as one of the big factors of why they are successful. It's a 36-month project. Construction projects are notorious for being late. They are scheduled on time. And rumor is they're going to finish a little early, like a month early. And guess what else? No serious injuries have been reported. They've had a few, I want to say 7 minor things that they had to report, but no major injuries with 1,200 people a day on site. So, you know what makes sense to motivate the elephant when it comes to safety. And, when it becomes a part of culture, it's so much easier for people to just fall in line as well. So here is a summary of motivate the elephant. Find the feeling, a positive emotion, not negative. If you focus on negative things, people are going to get worn out. You're going to create toxicity in the culture. So find the feeling, make it positive, shrink the change, and grow your people. Make it a change, make the change a matter of identity or a part of working at this organization. So here's a call to action. Identify a personal application for motivate the feeling. I always like to apply things at home or personally to really embrace the concepts. So I think sometimes, and it's easier to do at home sometimes first. So find a personal application to how do you motivate the elephant to clean the house? How do you motivate the elephant to work out? How do you motivate the elephant to eat better? Maybe you haven't found the elephant, a way to motivate the elephant in any of these applications. And then apply the concept at work. How do you improve the change message? And if you haven't done process walks before, I would encourage you to get more education on what process walks are and how to do it. And I would start using those. Fundamentally, it has motivate the elephant built in. So here's what we covered. Hopefully you feel like you've gotten some helpful behavioral change psychology. You've identified process walks and why they're effective change tools. And now you've got a little bit of homework to apply the change psychology methods at home and at work. And now you can enjoy your Halloween. So I also say we're going to open it up for Q&A and answer some questions. I am not in costume, but I will say that if I had my Miss Fix-a-Lot costume, I would have wore it, but I don't have it. So I believe John is going to put the link into my video, my music video, if you would like to see it. Ice, Ice Baby is now 5S Baby. We had a lot of fun doing it. And thank you so much for coming. So let's go ahead and open it up for questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tracy. And I just want to say Results Washington apologizes that we lost our ASL interpreter due to technical difficulties. So apologies for that. But we do have a couple of questions. And so one of these questions is, process walks sound like they take a lot of time.
Mhm.
And I work for a small agency with most of the people have a lot on their plate. Do you have any suggestions for process walks with people that have so much on their plate? So any way to kind of reduce the burden of process
Uh-huh.
walks?
So yeah, process walks, if you're not careful, process walks do require planning if you want to be efficient. And so there are a lot of planning tools. I've got some free planning tools at the JIT Cafe, your planning checklist, but you pick a process. Make sure you stick to a one process. And you don't want to cover too many things in the walk. You want to have people focus on one process, and you want to have people kind of go through their pieces. So you ask them, I work with the people to say, how much time do you think it would take for you to cover this part of the process? And they say, oh, 20 minutes or 40 minutes or 5 minutes. And that's a really important piece to schedule time, because if you're not careful, you could spend an entire day doing a process walk, and it can be helpful, but it might not be the amount of time you need. The other thing that I sometimes do is sometimes we break it out. It's you really want to try to get people there, because again, that's where the learning happens. Sometimes you have to break it up over a matter of days. And so sometimes people do that. But it's really, again, getting people to see that it can work, and believing that it could get better for them. And I always like to say, if people don't have time, work on something that is taking up a lot of their time.
Great suggestion. Thank you so much. Another question we have here is, do you have an electronic tool you recommend, preferably free, that helps in documenting the steps of a process walk?
So I don't have anything in particular, and the reason why is because I feel like lots of organizations have their own software to document a process. My favorite tool is a Chevron map that I build in PowerPoint, right? So we have a lot of tools on our JIT Cafe website for free. You don't have to pay for it. Just go to jitcafe.com, and we've got some downloadables that are free. But I really feel like here's one thing I will say, and I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I always like to follow the Grateful Dead rule anytime I'm mapping. And that is, you stay as high as you can, as long as you can. Because, getting too much in the weeds too soon, sometimes you don't need to detail that mapping out. So in order to find big opportunities. So I always like to say, stay high as long as possible. And, we've been able to do that fairly successfully in many organizations, because there's so much, there's so much to fix.
Great advice. Great advice. I find that myself as well. Well, we'd like to thank everybody for your attendance today. This was an amazing presentation. I took away a lot from this. So thank you so much, Tracy, for
Thank you
coming
so much.
and giving us all of this great knowledge. And I'm going to definitely be checking out that book.
Great.
Would like to thank all of you who are in attendance. We don't forget, we'll have these sessions available within a week, posted on our website. All of Tracy's materials are on our website if you want to take a look at her PowerPoint. Don't forget to check out those videos. They are fun, fun, fun. And so we've got 3 more sessions today of the Lean Conference, and I hope to see you back at 11. Thank you.
Thank you.